Hey, what's up everybody? This is Ace and I'm back with another reaction video. Here we go. Alright, True Blue, what a trek this album has been. Talk about a stunning and abrupt evolution. This was definitely a shift in tone and temperament. There's something stately and grand about the collective atmosphere of this album. It's bolder and more colorful, but at the same time, it's also shrouded in this sense of refinement. Visually, it's a sweeping departure and a near radical metamorphosis for Madonna. Gone are the jewelry, halter tops, and fussy long hair. Now she's coming off as more urbane, elegant, and sobered with a short platinum blonde cut, thick and defined eyebrows, and a more sophisticated approach in how she presented herself. Seriously, the shift from the Virgin tour to the music video for True Blue is just jarring. I think she flirted a little bit with Marilyn Monroe in that Material Girl video, but that felt more like, I want to say, like playing dress up. Here she really kind of personifies 1950s glamour and she mixes it with like a 1980s cool. She also comes off as more nuanced here. She's not as flashy in her sexuality as she was during the Virgin era. It's there, and in some ways it's probably even more naked than before, but it's also more tempered and not as loud. So in other words, Madonna grew up. Sonically, the album is also a stylistic left turn. Madonna took creative risks and went in new directions that weren't on the first two albums, which can be heard right away on Pop It Don't Preach. She also stepped up her vocal game big time. Those little girl squeals of the earlier albums don't exist here. Not only that, she's singing in this very, I want to say, bold and deep chest voice, and she's belting, doing semi-runs and sounding like she's enjoying the art of singing. Most of all, she's coming off as very commanding and sounds much more in control of her voice. So the sound of True Blue is big, sleek, much more polished, and seemed aimed straight at the mainstream, going further pop than her previous music. While lively enough to still appeal to the youth market, it's buffered with an adult contemporary MOR polish that makes the music also reachable to a more adult crowd. I also hear a greater use of the electric guitar. Aside from fleeting moments here and there, there's not much of a funk, rhythmic, or R&B lean to this album. The urban grit that was all over the first album and still kind of there on the second is pretty much gone here. The album is very narrative driven. Each song feels like its own individual movie. Half the songs on the track list feel like they're competing to be the one to ultimately define the concept of the album. As a result, the general theme of True Blue can feel a bit uneven. On one hand, it's sophisticated, passionate, and introspective, with songs about social issues, empowerment, romance, and fantasy. On the other hand, it kind of has this I want to say like a Pixie-ish, classic Americana vibe that indulges in a throwback motif. Despite the thematic inconsistency, however, the sincerity strings these divergent ideas together. I'm sensing that at this point in the 1980s, a shift in music and pop culture was taking place. Like perhaps the overall atmosphere of entertainment was becoming lighter and more vibrant by the time this album was released. I wasn't born in the 80s, but looking at other areas of entertainment like film and TV, it seems like around 1985, 86, 87, tones were changing into something that was more vivid and livelier. For example, I binge watched the TV show Dallas on Amazon Prime a couple of years ago and noticed that by the time the show hit like the middle 1980s, the hue was becoming brighter and glossier. I'm seeing that with True Blue. It feels sturdier than the music that came before it, but it also has a more sprightly tone to it. Meanwhile, it seems like more of a focus was put into the music videos this time around, with each, save for the title track, creating like this visual narrative to match or complement the intensity of the song's lyrical content. So before doing this wrap up, I listened to the full album on YouTube on my drive to and from work, and to be fair, Jimmy Jimmy didn't sound quite as bad as it did the first time I listened to it on my rinky-dink earbuds. The booming energy of it coming instead out of real speakers gives it some additional fleeting charm that escaped me the first time. That being said, this is still a no. Jimmy Jimmy is creative and genuine in its aim to be an adoring tribute to James Dean, and that aspect of it I can respect. And even though Madonna is being deliberately goofy on it at times, she's still still tends to sound technically good in her overall delivery, but it's way too fussy, manic, overproduced, and grating. Jimmy Jimmy tries too hard to be a concept song. It worked on White Heat, but it doesn't work here. I get what the song is trying to do. It's trying to be fun and lighthearted, but I just think it's just way too silly to the point of being totally dismissible.
There's hunger everywhere. We've got to take a stand. Reach out for someone and love makes the world go round.
The song aims to be carefree and celebratory with this rolling "Love is the Answer" theme backed by cliche instrumental and MIDI horns and la 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 la's, but ultimately it's trite. I mean, no one can argue its message. She's literally saying all the right things. I know PSAs were a big deal back in the 1980s and often influenced music to create these big altruistic anthems, and I can imagine that at the time, a big robust song like this with a sprightly socio-political message probably made the song seem like a good choice, but you know, of all the songs on the album, I think this one has aged the worst.
Where's the party? I want to free my soul. Where's the party? I want to lose control.
Where's the Party is lively and very thorough in its dissertation and assertions. It wants to compel you. It wants to be relatable. It wants to trigger your desire to have fun. It wants to be a good time. But for me, it's none of those things. You know, this is another song that I think it has sincere intentions but misses a mark. And instead, it kind of comes off as like overly ambitious and try hard. It seems like an attempt to almost like harken back to Madonna's dance floor roots, but she was in another place when she was making this album and it just doesn't jibe. There's nothing fluid or organic about the sound of it. It's stiff, stilted, aware of itself, and too wordy. Madonna sounds great on it though. She does. She sounds really good, and I get what she's trying to do, but ultimately it comes off like a demo to me.
Get out, stand tall. Your back up against the wall. 'Cause my love is dangerous. This is a bust.
So White Heat has a clean, clear, unfussy, and quasi-R&B feel to it with a fleeting rock edge on top. I love how it's gruff but still has a cool and easy flow. Madonna herself comes off as vigorous, vehement, and attitude-driven in her delivery. She sounds like she's having fun singing it. The song being inspired by the film also makes it a little bit more interesting. However, again, I think the film dialogue, in my opinion, is a little too prevalent and it kind of becomes distracting and slightly cheesy. As I said in the original reaction, it sounds more contemporary than 1986, and of the up-tempo songs in the album, I'd argue that White Heat has aged the best thanks to its looser and more relaxed rhythm. The song does what Where's the Party wanted to, is dance floor ready and has a genuine fluidity to it. Overall, I would say White Heat is dope. White Heat, I consider this the hidden gem of True Blue. It's a shame there was no video for it. So I was torn between True Blue and White Heat, but True Blue wins by technical knockout. It's bubbly, charming, and lyrical. It's got a universal message that's relatable even if it's a bit cheesy. For all of its schmaltziness though, the song has a stealthy shuffle rhythm pattern that I think complements it. The music does a good job of absorbing elements of throwback 60s doo-wop while still remaining contemporary enough to fit present day. Madonna's vocal delivery kind of tentatively like pivots from slightly more controlled head voice to her more sophisticated chest voice, but the transitions are seamless enough to not seem off-key or uncontrolled. The comments lead me to believe that the song is kind of a song that like fans can kind of take it or leave it, but I think the song is cool. That said, the video could have been better. The Peggy Sue Got Married meets the Smurfs thing just wasn't happening.
Open your heart to me, baby. I hold the lock and you hold the key.
Open Your Heart is a towering song with a towering hook that's catchy and memorable. Sonically, it virtually stalks the listener and it never stagnates. What's particularly interesting is how it walks a tightrope of being a type of song that could be multiple things at once. It's youthful and adult leaning, it's danceable and middle of the road. It can play at either a school dance or as overhead music at JCPenney's. There's also something about Open Your Heart that makes it seem like a more urbane cousin to the music of the first album. While it has a big booming and sleek sound that represented this newly refined Madonna, I hear fleeting elements of earlier songs like Burning Up and Lucky Star represented in it. Thematically, it's an enthralling mix of desperation, lustiness, and narcissism, but ultimately it's a song about pure determination and refusing to lose. Open Your Heart is dope.
And when the sound was played, the song would sit so high, ring through my ears and sting my eyes. You're spending teenage lullaby.
Lies La Bonita is perhaps the most descriptive, imaginative, and vivid of Madonna's songs up to this point. She's so sincere in her passion for this perfect retreat that you find yourself relating to her desire to go, even if you don't know where in the hell San Pedro is supposed to be. Furthermore, the song is methodically produced, it's colorful, catchy, and very meticulous in its arrangement, and nicely fits Madonna's voice. Lyrically, it walks solid, but it's really the melody that cements its grandeur. The Latin influences, I think, provides a nice change from the more standard dance pop of the album, and really kind of sets out to prove her versatility as an artist. La Isla Bonita, I think, really kind of adds another hue to an already colorful album.
Papa, don't preach. I've been losing sleep, but I made up my mind. I'm keeping my baby.
So Papa Don't Preach is an outright powerhouse of an opening track. It immediately makes a statement with this dramatic string intro, and the melody of the verses are fittingly penned. What's fascinating about the song is that despite the narrative being a fabrication, it can be argued as inadvertently playing on a trajectory that had been previously laid out. On Like a Virgin, Madonna had boldly weaponized her sexuality, touched for the very first time and all that jazz. Papa Don't Preach almost feels like the dark sequel to that, and it deals with the consequences, interjected with the sense of drama, assisted by Madonna's reluctant yet firm vocal performance. So seeking parental compassion in the wake of an unexpected pregnancy and ultimately deciding to keep the baby, the song's lyrical stance transformed Madonna's image into a singer who could address buzzworthy political issues in the framework of a pop song. The music video, meanwhile, I think shows Madonna perfectly acting out the story and character while also narrating the song as herself in an equally compelling fashion. I can imagine that Papa Don't Preach might stand as one of the most standout moments of her career.
Hope I live to tell the secret I have learned till then. It will burn inside of me.
Live to Tell is an atmospheric, brooding, and chilling ballad that shrouds the listener with this stunning synth instrumental and an incisive beat that emphasize the haunting lyrics. I'm still not completely sure what the song is about, but it's persuasive all the same. Madonna sings it with this mix of sadness, determination, transcendence, and hope. The part where she comes back after that long dramatic pause is spellbinding. Madonna successfully executed adult contemporary with this melancholic ballad that is incredibly deep yet ambiguously inspirational. Complex yet subtle, simple but strong. It's just a stunning song all around. I think the song is Grammy worthy. In the dark, simplistic music video, I think does a good job of underscoring the dusky feel of the song. Madonna took a risk here, a big one. Now, I said she took a risk going from the more street-tinged urban club music of the debut to the more shopping mall pop sound of Like a Virgin, but truth be told, both played close enough to the same bottom line. Both were targeted to young people, with the only difference being perhaps a zip code. True Blue is more casually youthful and was a much bigger gamble. We've seen artists take creative risks going in the opposite direction of what's expected of them, sometimes to disastrous results. They wind up alienating their fans, and their careers are never quite the same. In some cases, it kills it.
And it really surprised people that, here's Madonna, and the last record, this before Live to Tell, was Like a Virgin. So like the last things they heard from her, Material Girl and Like a Virgin, and then this. And believe me, that was one scared record company. She said, this is the first single. It's like, oh my God. They really said it's over. Like, it's over, you're doomed.
A lot of artists talk about fearing the sophomore slump and the pressure to continue the momentum of their first album with their second. However, the third album seems to be the most crucial test. By the third album, they're not new anymore, and it's easy for artists to become stale. Meanwhile, there's a newer crop of up-and-coming acts joining the game, vying for that spotlight and being propped up as the next big thing. A successful third album can graduate an artist from being a possible fad to solidify them as a mainstay. A failed third album can do the exact opposite. With True Blue, Madonna cleverly moved the needle forward without alienating her fans. While she didn't absolutely abandon the essence of what made her successful previously, she definitely overhauled it to the point where it was enough of a pivot where it could have backfired on her had it not been done right and had she not remained compelling enough to keep public interest. However, someone said in the comments to one of the reaction videos that if Madonna hadn't evolved at that moment, chances are she would have turned herself into a fad and she wouldn't have lasted longer, and I agree with that. I think this was a crossroads for her. Like a Virgin Part 2 and a continuation of that bubblegum street look, I think could have run the risk of rendering her predictable at a crucial point. So Madonna to me seems like an animal who can sense when a change in the climate is looming and instinctively knows when to go the other way. This reinvention allowed her to present herself through a new lens while she still benefited from the star power that her prior success brought her. Again, it was a gamble. It could have backfired, but it didn't. For all of its glories though, True Blue has some spotty sections and is home to some alarming fillers. There are some awkward moments of forced camp that I think were needless, probably as a buffer for the album not being as bubblegum as the one that came before it. Like Jimmy Jimmy has no business being on the same album as Papa Don't Preach and Live to Tell, and the cheesier moments of the album ironically are equally as noticeable as the moments of maturity and can almost distract from the more stellar content. That being said, I ultimately give this album major kudos for the artistic growth that she displays here. I know this time Madonna was one of the principal producers and she basically did half of it with Patrick Leonard and the other half of it with Steve Bray, which was another risk. After the big success of Like a Virgin, you'd think she'd be calling up Nile Rodgers for another go-round. That she stepped up to the plate and took more control while working with two more modestly known collaborators at a time when she was on a commercial high and produced something even bigger seems like a real game-changing moment for her. As far as Leonard and Bray themselves go, I can hear the distinction in their respective tracks. Bray's tracks felt breezier, more up-tempo and colorful, while the productions with Leonard run the gamut of being up-tempo to mid-tempo to ballads and have more layers overall. Their respective styles, however, flow seamlessly enough to ultimately coexist without sounding too contrasting. Furthermore, it was probably wise of Madonna to work with two lower-key collaborators, as it no doubt allowed her to exert more of her own input over the final product. Something tells me that Nile Rodgers probably would have resisted being dictated to. So when I average out the grades of all my previous True Blue song reactions, the album ultimately gets a letter grade of a B, which is higher than a B- I gave to Like a Virgin. And while it still falls under the A- I gave to the debut, I concede that True Blue is a good and strategic album that shows a good amount of artistic growth and star power. With this album, I feel like the grinding days are over. This right here is the output of a superstar. My top 6 songs are all what I would consider to be good to stellar. That's more than half the track listing, so ultimately I consider True Blue a solid album that's worth listening to. But how do you feel about it? How do you feel about Madonna's True Blue album? Leave me some comments, like and subscribe, and until next time, peace.